Just tell me what to start, Sam. You are in control here. You are the editor.
Start everything. Start everything right.
A conversation that we've had a lot between us and sort of in public as well is what fight you would want to show someone that's never seen this sport before. That fight, you and Gabriel and Big Nip are also there, is probably one of my picks.
I think it was probably one of our favourite fights. It was horrible afterwards. We were completely trashed inside. We've never actually run Carbide that hard. It wasn't really hits on anything solid, but it's just the amount of hits. Like the constant spin up every time. It's just using a lot of power. After this fight, we took the lid off and the batteries were pretty much fizzing. So like we had to chuck them away and get some delivered pretty much the next day. And our fight was, we nearly didn't make the next match actually. Yeah, I was waiting outside in the rain for him to turn up, waiting for the delivery guy, and then we got him charged, and we had about 3 minutes to spare. Otherwise, we wouldn't have made the next fight.
It's nice to know that was all kind of real drama, though.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to be quite cynical when you watch the show of how much of this happened, how much of this is sort of edited in to make it look more exciting than it was. But that was exactly as shown.
Yeah, it was really good actually, and like the Gabriel guys, they took it really well. Like they had a great time. They enjoyed it. That's what they wanted from it. So yeah.
So if we're looking at that as an example of a great fight, what for you as a competitor and as a viewer makes a great fight?
For me, I think I usually prefer the fights that we lose if we lose them well. So like at Battlebots, just against like Minotaur, we lost that. But it was like 3 minutes of two people beating the shit out of each other, wasn't it? It was like, even though we lost, it was like we learnt a lot from it. And we also were quite chuffed that we could actually take that for 3 minutes. And, it's something that's like genuinely close at the end. We were pretty sure that they'd won it, but we weren't like 100% sure. Like, when you've got some doubt yourself, I think that's a really good match. And that's what makes really good TV as well. So, but for me, like, not necessarily just our fights, when you're watching someone else and, it's really even, but it's like fully action-packed throughout the whole thing. It's not just like two pushers like knocking each other a little bit for 3 minutes. So no one wants to watch that. If you've got two robots like absolutely beating the crap out of each other for like 3 minutes solid, and at the end it's like, well, which way did that go? For me, that is a really good match.
Do you think it's all about like I don't want to phrase it, like the tactics involved with driving and stuff? Like if you're watching, do you watch many fights? And if you're watching them, are you sort of thinking about the tactics involved going on, or is it just, not just, but like, are you sort of like enjoying the spectacle of it more?
It depends how busy we've been leading up to it. You don't really get time to think about it most of the time, but if you've had 5 minutes to think about it, like, oh, what do you reckon this team would do against that? Oh, they'd probably do this. And 9 times out of 10, you're right. It's like they've done the sensible thing, because we're all kind of on the same sort of page. Everyone knows what works and what doesn't these days. So it's like good to watch them and implement that. Sometimes it works for them, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you watch, what the hell did they do that for? It's quite interesting watching what people do and how people get around problems, and that's what makes it all kind of interesting for us, really, yeah.
How much thought do you put into strategy for your own fights? I think a lot of people have this idea that spinners aren't particularly strategic. It's kind of spin up and go. Is that the way you're viewing it, or is there a sort of degree of nuance in your approach?
It depends which robot we're entering with Carbide. It was always designed to be, this is what it is, it's built, there's not a lot we can do. There's obviously like some variations with certain configurations we did, like against Nuts, we made that thing on the front to protect the chain, but generally it was just more driving tactics than the actual configuration of the robot. Always kind of designed to, because our disc kind of went clockwise, we'd always aim to drive up onto them on the left so we could block their left-hand side. So other than that, it's very much point the nose at them and go with Carbide, whereas with Cobalt, you have to drive it a lot more carefully. And we've got different configurations for different robots we'd go against. I can't really say at the minute what those configurations are, but like we kind of design everything with some consideration into worst case scenarios. So if we were going against Minotaur again, we've got a setup for him there. Got a setup for like Bite Force, Tombstone, all the big names. We always kind of think, well, what if we're drawing against them, and what are we going to draw against them? And sometimes there just isn't an ideal configuration. Yeah, I think you've got a robot like Carbide or like Megabyte or something, you kind of have to stick to your guns at the start. You come up with your design, you go, right, this is what I'm doing. That's how it's going to be. Everything else you have to kind of configure it to fight other people. So like Jamie, who built Coyote, he'd had different setups to fight us. That he would to fight, I don't know, like Thor or someone. The same with us now. We're designing things to be more modular. I think that's very much the future of the sport. It's very rock, paper, scissors. But if you've got like a robot that can be, all three of those things, then and do it well, then you're gonna do well throughout the competition. That's the way that like we see it. And yeah. So.
Are you talking about like configurability in terms of sort of like armor configuration, or are you sort of thinking of robots that have very different types of weapon, like Bombshell did?
I think that's very good for some teams. It works for them. For us, we we're sticking with the same weapon throughout and configuring it differently to fight one thing. So we're not going with like multiple weapons. We're going with the same kind of fundamental robot, but like the small incremental changes that can make it better or worse.
Yeah, so things like minor optimizations you can make to your ground clearance or to the speed of the weapon or something like that to try.
Yeah, things like gearing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Just minor tweaks really. Sound like a Formula One car. You set the geometry for one track differently to another track, but looking at it, it's the same car. Do you know what I mean? Like you wouldn't unless you were like one of the design engineers, you would not notice the difference between the car. So it's like incremental small changes as well as like the big obvious ones, like putting an axe or a spinner on. It's like the small changes as well make a massive effects to the actual robot's performance.
One of the things that I wanted to ask, or that we both wanted to ask, maybe a bit later on, but I think we've sort of touched on it here, is like the differences and the minor upgrades that you've made to Carbide and all of your robots throughout the years and stuff. Like if you've got a robot that's already doing well, what changes are you making to it? Because like the different versions of Carbide that have been on TV, they all look quite similar to us.
Yeah.
But like, I'm curious to know what can you tell us about the changes you've made inside to help make it more reliable and make it better?
So Series 1 Carbide was obviously had NPCs, which are like wheelchair motors for drive, and it had like an E-Tech, I think they're called whatever the original E-Techs were called, I can't remember now. But we did find some vulnerabilities with that, like the clutch kept breaking, the motor for the weapon kept breaking, and the drive didn't break, but it was a bit sluggish, and it did break, but not enough to actually stop the machine. Like you had like small failures. So between Series 8 and Series 9, Carbide, as you say, it was the same outside, pretty much. A few like changes to make it look a bit cooler, but the actual innards of the machine were completely renovated. So the weapon motor, which kept every fight, we'd have to spend about between 2 and 4 hours, however long we got to get it working again. We had to remount the motor. So we ended up making our own motor for it. That was a lot of work, but worth it in the end. The drive, we went from, to save weight, we actually ended up going from NPCs to mag motors. Made our own custom gearboxes and everything for those to fit. And that actually worked out a lot lighter, a lot more powerful, and a lot faster than the original. So it was a complete upgrade. All the electronics pretty much stayed the same. The clutch we changed slightly. So in Season 8, we had a lot of problems with the clutch exploding. And then we went to Battlebots and we had a chat with Ray Billings from Tombstone. We kind of said, we noticed he was using the exact same clutch. And we're like, how come yours doesn't blow up and ours does? And like, the only difference was basically one washer. So we put next to another washer and it worked perfect. Well, 99% of the time. So it's just little like incremental changes that you find out and you learn and things like that. And then Season 10, a lot of the internal components stayed the same on Carbide, but the chassis was starting to twist. So we actually ripped out most of the bottom A-frame, rewelded all that with chromoly tubes and a few other bits and bobs. And then we started, obviously that went through Season 10 and everything worked pretty well. And then for Season 11, if it was happening, we actually started stripping down Carbide for Season 11, should it happen. We stopped all work once we found out it was cancelled, but we started changing a few bits on the weapon that would have like made it a bit more reliable and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it's just slow evolution really, because things like that, you can't fix it or you don't know there's going to be a problem until it's broken.
Yeah. I think that's amazing that you say what a big upgrade here is the addition of a single washer. That's astonishing to me that can make such a big difference to a robot.
Yeah, so basically like Season 8 or Series 8, the grand final, we lost that because of a single washer. So when you put it that way, it's crazy, isn't it? So
I just find it hard to imagine being that close to optimal already that a small change like that could do anything. That's kind of a dream scenario.
Yeah, it's crazy. But towards the end, Carbide was pretty optimal. It was just small reliability changes, but I don't know if you'll ever get a robot like that 100% reliable, because it's dishing out a lot of impacts, isn't it? And it's got to take it itself for so long. It's hard. So yeah, I mean, like Tombstone, he's been doing it for how long? 12 years or something now. He still has breakdowns, bars snap, and things go wrong, catches fire, and he's still learning now. So I don't think there ever really is an end to it. There's no like, okay, that's perfect now. That never breaks. Especially when you're trying to do something that's so damaging. You could make a spinner like Carbide that was like half the energy and it'd last forever. But there's no fun in that, is there? you always want more power, and then you get it reliable, and then it will break, and you go, oh, I'll just put more power in it, and then like it's just a never-ending cycle of just screwing yourself over, really.
The thing that's always stood out to me is that you were able to make those changes and improvements while, for the most part at least, winning. So was it a question of the couple of defeats that you had with the robot and the couple of maybe tougher fights where things went wrong were enough for you to learn, or was it experience from previous robots feeding as well? How were you able to do that?
It was a bit of both. It was experience from previous robots with the initial build, and then from there onwards, that's why I say I like the fights that we lose, because you learn more. If you keep winning, yeah, great, like Bite Force sort of thing, but you don't learn anything unless you have a close call and think, oh, better improve that next time, like, because it was close. Like, if you keep winning and it's just relentlessly reliable, until you finally get beaten by something, you've got nowhere to go with it, and the whole thing becomes kind of hollow then. So yeah, it's great, win, but it kind of sucks the fun out of it at the same time. So for me, I'm not really that bothered about being on TV and doing all that sort of stuff. It's like the designing of it and the building of it and having a laugh whilst you're doing that is more enjoyable, and like trying to make something that's optimal. So I don't know, just trying your hardest to make something that's perfect. It's never going to be perfect, and having that kind of goal of that, knowing that you're never going to reach it, or you're very unlikely to ever reach it, that's what makes it kind of fun. You've always got something to achieve. So
it's interesting to hear you say about the sort of TV side of it. On the show, you always seemed very calm, very businesslike. And something that I've often wondered is that because you're trying to manage how you come across on camera? Or is that something that is just completely natural to you and your approach to competition?
I think I'm naturally quite chilled anyhow. And if it goes wrong, then there's no point worrying about it, because you can't do anything about it really, unless you got a machine shop with you, so you can only do the best with what you've got. So there's no point worrying about it. TV, I'm not sure really many competitors like the TV side of it. I could be wrong. What do you think? Do you enjoy it? Oh, Jamie enjoyed it. He had his hair done specially for it and everything, and like he just before his event, before the fights, he goes and sits on the sunbed and all this kind of stuff. Like he loves it. So they really wanted us to be the bad guys. So we were actually talking about this the other night. I think it was either season 8 or season 9. Sorry, either season 9 or season 10. We got a phone call. Just literally, we loaded the car. We were ready to drive up to Scotland, and we got a phone call off one of the. I can't remember her name, but one of the producers, and she basically said, right, you guys ready? And we're like, yeah, we're good to go, car's loaded, we're about to set off, booked into the hotel, yada yada. I said, oh, okay, cool, can you change your uniforms to all black? Like, why? And they were like, oh, we want you guys to be the bad guys. I was like, nah, we've already got the interview. We've already got the uniforms paid for, and they're expensive. And I'm not going out now to buy all black shirts and stuff. Like, no. They're like, oh, can you be the bad guys though? I was like, no. Like, we've built the robot. We're going to come. We're going to be us. So do whatever you want. But you have to be very careful when you're being filmed, because it's very easy for a bit of moody music to go over the top of something, and a voiceover going, oh, these guys are scumbags. And then like all of a sudden all the audience and everyone that's watching the show thinks, oh yeah, they're scumbags. So you have to be really careful about how things are portrayed. They did it to us a couple of times, like literally after the Gabriel fight, after we went outside in the rain for these batteries to turn up, I came back in, I was like, yeah, got them. And some moody music was over the top, and it looked like I'd been sweating because of all the rain on my hair. And the camera guy said something to me. I was like, oh, And like they just used that little clip of me looking. It just came across as me looking angry about something. I just didn't hear what the guy was saying. I'd been standing outside. I wasn't stressed, so it's like I don't really do getting stressed. But yeah, you have to be careful.
Yeah. I think it's interesting they sort of seem to have like a preconceived idea of like, so I'm aware that like in production they will take stuff out of context to try and tell a story that they want to tell.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting that they seem to have a preconceived notion of what that would be before you'd filmed it. Of sort of like, you know, specifically asking you to be the bad guys and stuff. I think is interesting that it's sort of like what we've decided this is one of the storylines in the.
Yeah, it's like,
series.
well, you smashed everyone's robots and toys up. You must be a bad guy, and we want to portray you as that. And then I don't know. If you meet me and Sam, I don't think we're bad people. So it's kind of, do you play up to that, and then you could have the whole country just thinking you're a bit of a dick, or do you just do what you want to do, and then you get there and think, no, I'm just going to do what I want to do. I'm just going to do what I normally do. So in an ideal TV world, the TV people, they want actors who build robots, but you never get that. Or it's very rare that you get that. You get the odd person like Will Bales who's really good at both. But most engineers are kind of not that way inclined, not really showy offy. Look at me, like it's just kind of like, oh, I've tried hard on this. Like, this is my best go at this. Like, do you like it? Okay, yeah, cool. Glad you like it. And that's kind of it.
How much does like the TV production influence the kinds of robots that people make? Do you reckon? Like, were there any changes to Carbide or anything that like the production company asked you to make, or were like, could you do this for us, or is it just sort of like they'll film whatever they've sort of accepted onto the competition?
Yeah, so you send in your application, and they kind of give you some feedback, don't they? So you know more about this than me. So like with Battlebots, you kind of applied, didn't you? What was your feedback? You kind of said like,
Come on, Jamie.
Yeah, so myself and Alistair Sutherland applied for Battlebots the 2020 season. It was basically a design loosely based on Dead Metal, so the friction saw blades running off a LEM motor, and we were more aiming for the fact that it was going to be entertaining to look at. So it's not necessarily a kind of fight-winning weapon. It was more just to entertain and throw sparks around. But they fed back and said because they needed to see the weapon in action to know how effective it would be, and we didn't want to build it without having confirmation if it had been accepted or not. So they just wanted to see it in action, but in order to feel confident, giving us maybe it gives us a chance. But in the end, they never went for it. But you get various feedback in terms of what they want, really.
Yeah. So I know Battlebots have kind of got the philosophy of what is the cheers, Jan. So what is the silhouette of your robot? So you got to have some reason to be. You got to have something that makes you different. For the first season of Robot Wars, they were just glad to get that many people apply, and then it was kind of like, what experience? It was more like a job interview, wasn't it? It was like, okay, so have you built a robot before? Yeah. Do these guys kind of know what they're doing? And then like, because Grant and James were like working involved with it, it was kind of like they'd say, okay. They saw the application from me and Sam, and they'd go, do these guys know what they're doing? And they were like, yeah, they've been doing it for a while. And then other people would apply, and it'd be like a remote control car with like a wheelbarrow over the top of it, and they'd be like, okay, this probably isn't going to be very good. Put that in the scrap pile. And I think originally it was kind of like, who's got experience, or who's not so much do you know these guys. It wasn't really who you know. It was like, if you put together an application that was like, okay, this is fair, like that. Their components look good. These guys know what they're doing. They seem to have some experience or knowledge of what they're making. You got a chance of getting in. But then after that, it was, they did ask us to make a few changes, and we were like, I'll think about it. Like, you can kind of do so much, and then if it goes past the point of, no, I don't want to build something that looks ridiculous, I just don't want to do it, that they'll tend to rein back what they're asking from you.
Have you ever been recognised in public for your appearance on Robot Wars?
Got recognised a few times. Asked for interview for autographs and stuff. It was quite nice. And then the best one was just popped into McDonald's one day, and then the manager came out from behind the thing and went, "Oh, you're that guy for Robot Wars?" Like, yeah. He goes, "Oh, let me get you a coffee." I was like, "Oh, yeah, cheers."
But you're basically in profit at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
1 free coffee.
Yeah, exactly. So the robot costs about 15 grand to build, but I got coffee out of it. So.
If it's a really good coffee.
Oh yeah, the caramel lattes from McDonald's. They're not bad. They're not bad. If they're listening to this, I'm open to sponsorship.
How does no Battlebots team have a McDonald's sponsorship by now?
I think there's you're not allowed sponsors that are bigger than the sponsors for the show, basically. So yeah, so
interesting.
Yeah, I think there's some sort of rule like that. I think some teams have approached really big companies and they've had something agreed, and then Battlebots have turned around and said they've got to approve your sponsors basically, and you could turn around and get sponsored by like Margaret's tea shop down the road, and if they say no, then it's no deal really.
Something you touched on in that was, that you are the guys, not the only ones, but one of the teams that are really dealing big damage. How does it feel to do that much damage to other people's robots?
I don't think we've ever. It's all right as long as they take it well, and it's clear that you've not been over the top with it. So I know a few people fell out with like Will Thomas at Robot Wars because he kind of like really went for it against a few guys after they were dead. We tended not to do that to a degree, anyhow. But as long as if they keep fighting you and you keep hitting back, it's that's what the sport is. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, if they stop and you stop hitting them, then as long as you kind of abide by that kind of gentleman's agreement, then you're all right. Obviously, that's not what the producers want you to do. They want you to keep smashing the hell out of them for the full 3 minutes. But at the end of the day, I've known a lot of these people for like over 10 years, and it's like you don't want to cause your mates like thousands of pounds worth of damage for nothing, and they'd understandably be very annoyed about that if you did. But I've never had anyone like take it really badly, or even if they were like, I think it's like a spur of the moment bit of like emotion where they're like, oh no, I can't believe you did that, and then like half an hour later, once they've gone away and had a coffee and chilled out and had to think about it, and they're like, oh no, it was a good fight, like I enjoyed that. So I think there's a lot of like heightened emotions at the time, and if you're not going to be very happy if someone really destroys something that you spent 6 months building and spent thousands of pounds on, but at the same time you have to think, oh no, I signed up to this, I knew what I was doing. So yeah, I've never really personally had anyone like be really upset with me about it.
So I think our perspective on that is quite twisted because we've actively, after competition, taken on more spinner fights just to take more damage. So we're definitely on that side of the we want this to happen kind of scale.
Yeah, some people are sadistic. I haven't really been on not massively. Like we've taken damage, but I've never really been on the receiving end of really receiving any serious damage. So I've been quite lucky, really.
Have you had people pull out of fights because they don't want to fight you?
Yeah.
How do you feel about them doing that?
That's all right. You can just take the piss out of them for years afterwards. Did you hear about Shrederator at Battlebots?
I was going to say, I love how you phrased that as if you didn't know that, Sam.
Well, I'm sorry. Yes, I've heard about Shrederator.
Yeah, you know what you were asking there, didn't you?
No.
Yeah.
That isn't the question as it was written down, put it that way.
Yeah, that's fine. I've got that over Brian now for the rest of his life. So yeah, I was used as an ammo. So yeah, at the time it's a bit like frustrating, especially if you've already configured your robot to fight that guy, and then you have to go back and reconfigure it to fight someone else. But at the end of the day, I turn up with the mentality of I've got to fight everyone here. I'm not going to go, I don't want to fight them, because that's what you're there for. I think you should turn up to an event with the expectation of fighting anyone, and be prepared for that fact.
Yeah, you want to turn up with for the small events that Ryan and I have done, we've always turned up with the expectation that we're going to lose our robot in that thing. It's like we're going to go there, we're going to accept every fight, and we're expecting that the robot will be completely toast and unusable by the end of it. And that's sort of that's always the mentality that we've gone in with. That's
the best way of looking at it already, isn't it? So I'd never back out of a fight. You kind of get not so much a Robot Wars, they've already decided who's fighting who before you get there, but at BattleBots, before it all happens, you sit down with I don't know if you guys know this, but when you get there, you have I can't remember what the terminology of it is, but basically you sit down with Chris and Kenny, all the kind of producers, Greg will be there, like the owner of the shows, and all the kind of head people and the people that present it, and I'll say, right, who do you want to fight, and who don't you want to fight, and like why, and they kind of question you, and you can kind of use that as an opportunity to kind of tell them how you really feel about it. So like, not many people I imagine go in there and go, yeah, give me Bite Force. Like you'd say, like I'd fight Bite Force if we were put against it, but I always kind of want to test the waters first. So I'd be like, give us someone we can knock about who will take a few hits and we want to make good TV for. And then once we know our robot's working well, give us whoever. Like that's kind of the dream situation for us, because the worst thing for us would be go in there, something silly happens, the robot sucks and he puts on bad TV. I'd rather kind of warm up to find the big guns and then go from there. So
prove the robot before you do anything with it.
Exactly, yeah.
It's interesting you say about that, because we had something similar, and obviously it's a completely different scale. We had a similar thing for Battlebots, and it was very interesting looking at our heat draw. It was kind of a similar thing of who do you want to face, who do you not want to face, and why. And if you looked at our heat draw, you could see that it had a certain amount of influence. Do you think the meeting that you had influenced the fight you got?
I think so. That they want to know, at the end of the day, all the producers and everything, they want to make good TV. So they want to line people up with whoever they think will make a good show. So they wouldn't put, for example, they wouldn't choose to put, going back to like thinking of names, just picking them out of the air, you wouldn't go Tornado or Storm 2, like in an ideal situation, because it's just box versus box, and it's not going to make good TV. Whereas like going back to what I said, I think that's maybe why we had Duck, because Duck can really take a beating. We knew we could dish it out, but we wanted to bed it in and find problems, and then that fight made really good TV. So I think that they'll listen to you, as long as you don't go in there with a really rubbish robot saying, yeah, we're going to beat Tombstone. I think they're not idiots. They're going to know. And I don't think they'd make that match unless they literally looked at you like cannon fodder. So yeah, I think they do listen to the teams, and at the end of the day, we want to make good TV. They want to make good TV. So if you're sensible about it, I think they'll kind of listen to your opinions. Yeah.
One thing I know that Sam in particular wants to talk about is kind of moving a bit away from the TV side and more into the build side.
Yeah.
So Sam, do you want to quiz away with all of your questions?
I don't know where to begin. Are there any so you're at various tournaments, whatever, and you look around the field. Are there any sort of like robots that you've seen there and gone, I wish I'd thought of that? Either the robot in general or like a specific part of it, maybe, if there's like a mechanism that you've seen and gone, I wish I'd come up with that, or anything like that.
Yeah, it's always really small things that I see people do that are really nice. So like Bombshell last season, it didn't work very well, but like his gearboxes inside were dead fancy. He had these like, what are they called, cycloidic gearboxes or something? Epicyclic gearboxes, yeah. I've never seen that before in a robot. I thought that was really fancy, like it worked really well. Just little things like that. I think that they're really nice, but generally I go to an event with the robot I've built because that's what I think will win, or I think that's going to be like the dominant design. So I turn up with that, I think, yeah, I reckon we could have him. He probably sucks like that, but we'll give it a go. And like, I think if you don't turn up with that mentality, then you've probably designed and built the wrong robot. So I think you've got to turn up and really have confidence in your own design. But there are robots I see and I think, that's clever. Like when Huge first came out, I kind of looked at it and thought, oh, that's going to break or that's going to suck. And then like, saw it after a few fights, I was like, actually, that's clever. I like that. I like what I've done there. Yeah, I was like, yeah, that's cheeky. He's done well there. Yeah. Yeah, I think having confidence in your own design, that's important. But every team's got something small that they've done. You think, oh yeah, I like that. That's really good. So like, there's small things that like me and Sam, we tend to over-engineer certain things, and then you look at other teams and think, that's not going to work, and then it does, and you think, oh yeah, we thought about that too much. Like I think we overthink everything. I think sometimes the simplest way of doing things works really well. So.
definitely empathise with that feeling.
Yeah, we've done the overthinking. When you're build or like designing the robot and stuff, like what kind of, how much of the robot is designed before you start building stuff, or do you sort of like design it as you prototype it or something like that? Like, is it something you've thought through completely, or do you have to have your hands on the stuff?
We kind of just decide on components first, so like the major components, like your motor, speed controllers, all that sort of stuff, and then we put it into CAD, and then we work backwards from that. So we'll probably spend, so the new Cobalt, it's probably 80-20, 80% design time, 20% build time, because I think that the more you design things, the less the less you got to think about it as you're actually making it. So like the whole chassis was just laser cut and then bent. And then we'd tap all the holes in the plates before it was even a robot, and then weld it together. We knew exactly where they went to go to the millimetre, and it kind of all just went together. It's more of an assembly by that point. You spend all the time designing it, because I think if you start building it, you can kind of engineer yourself into a corner then. Whereas, so like Cobalt started off, the disc was much bigger, and other factors, and then as you design it, you work out, oh no, it's going to be too heavy, so you shrink it down, and then that makes the chassis slightly smaller in all dimensions. And then if you started off and just went, right, I'm going to make it this big, you'd end up compromising a lot of stuff as you're actually building it. So I think designing it is really important now.
So during that process, are you using lots of rules of thumb, or are you doing a lot of like structural analysis and stuff? Like, is it, or is
a bit of both.
Yeah.
So like a lot of it's from experience. So like you go, okay, the disc wants to be this big, and we want the tough speed to be this big, this fast, and then you kind of work backwards from that. You go, right, well, this is the motor that we're going to use. What gearing would be sensible? Okay, that's good. So that makes the disc this big to get that tough speed, and etc. And you kind of work towards it that way. That's driven a lot by timescales now. So generally, you get told, right, the season of Battlebots coming up, or the season of Robot Wars, whatever. And then you go, right, okay, cool, so I need to start designing now. And then between being accepted with your design and the actual shipping out of the robot is such a small window of time that you can't afford to just be prototyping and stuff. It's got to just be like, right, click order on all the bits, it's all going to show up, and then I've got to start putting it together. Like, there's no time to be messing about, like, designing as you go. Certain things, yeah, like little brackets for bits and bobs, you go, okay, I made this, but like, the large fundamental bits, like, it's all designed beforehand, really.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, like my first heavyweight turbulence that I built, I could just start building it as I thought it was going to work. And then it turned out I made the whole robot like 50 mil too narrow. So like, kind of had the motors here and the pneumatic ram was in the middle. I think it was a long time ago. And then it didn't fit. And the actual ram turned up. I bought it off eBay, so I ended up chopping the whole heavyweight down the middle with an angle grinder and then welding it a bit wider apart. And just that sort of stuff you just can't do now. There's not enough time to do it. So.
Have you done, I don't know if it was like when they were building Quantum or Spectre, but like one of those crushing robots that they did all the crazy like material analysis and stuff to sort of like find the stresses and carve it away to the bare minimum. Have you played with any of that kind of that stuff for your robots, or do you just sort of go, we think this thickness will hold it and we're not going to try and make it any thinner?
Yeah, I think that the analysis stuff is good. So if you're making a crusher like with theirs, like all builders have different philosophies about things. Like if you put Quantum through a simulation, it will take the loadings, but then it's very hard to design it in a way that say, okay, well, if tombstone hit that bit, is that going to work well? Because you don't know unless there's a certain amount of experience in it. So you can't simulate everything, every situation. You can simulate, okay, well, the hydraulic ram's going to force this much force through that axis, and that's the tuff's going to push back up that way. And you can kind of work out, okay, it's going to hold together. But then designing an extra layer of like protection into it so you know it's going to take hits, you can't really do that through analysis. So I don't think you could rely linear. So
I think that is one of the things that kind of differentiates between teams in some way, and their approach is how much of it is an art, how much of it is a science. And I think most people looking in on the sport, once they see people using CAD, I think it comes across as at that point being pretty much all science. But it's kind of relieving to hear that the experience you have, the things that you've used on other robots, still play into that, and there are still decisions being made that aren't sort of purely on screen. Feels harsh, but
Yeah. So like bulkheads in Cobalt, for example, we could have made them way skinnier, but then you think, okay, but tombstone might hit it, so it needs to be a bit thicker here, and et cetera, et cetera. You kind of have to design it in a way that you think, okay, that fits. Let's take some weight out of it so the robot doesn't end up 150 kilo, and then you go, okay, well, that's too skinny, and then you have to kind of design it with everything kind of in mind. It's not easy. I think if you designed a robot completely in CAD, just to take its own forces, you could end up with something really weedy and super lightweight. But then for having it get flipped by Hydra and then land on like one wheel somewhere, you think, okay, that is actually going to bend. But it's things like that you have to really think of everything. It's not easy. I think that's something that really comes with experience, and knowing the competition really helps.
So you mentioned that you've designed a lot of the robot before you do stuff, and you sort of say that you just like place an order and assemble it and stuff. So I'm like curious, like how much of it is stuff that it's just like off the shelf parts versus stuff that you're having someone else fabricate for you, versus how much of your robot is stuff that you're fabricating in house, where you're just buying a sheet of material and then machining it yourself.
So a lot of the actual chassis work, we'll get the material in and then send it to our sponsors, who's a laser cutter. They'll chop it all out for us, and then we'll take it to a company that do bending. They'll bend it to spec, because these materials are so thick and strong now, you can't do it in the garage. So a lot of the machining is done by our teammate Kenny. He's a CNC engineer, or I'll do a bit through my business, which is like getting CNC engineered custom parts like titanium bits and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of it is we design it and then we'll either make it in-house to such, or we'll get it farmed out. But all the welding, the fabrication, all like the design work, that's all us. There's no the only off-the-shelf parts in it are modified heavily as well. So like things like the speed controllers, we do modifications to them that other teams don't do. That's why ours are reliable. So we'll like machine the cases down on those, because we know we're not drawing massive current through them for our drive. So there's little factors that we take in. So like the heat sinks on the Vex BBs are quite heavy, so we machine them down, because if something weighs half a kilo just normally, when you throw like 5 Gs through it, it's going to end up weighing like the equivalent of like 10 times the amount or whatever. And just every bit of weight that you can machine out of like small components is weight that you can put into other features of the machine. So things like that. And then the gearboxes are all custom made in-house. And then there's not really many components in there that are like, you can buy off the shelf. I don't think there's anything in there that's really unmodified. Maybe the receivers.
in your design process, how much is maintainability a factor?
Depends on the robot. So for me, maintainability is a big factor. So on Carbide, everything was accessible from the top. It was all, you could get in there with a screwdriver and just electrically undo everything with an impact gun, and just everything would just come out the top, and it was just very maintainable. The last Cobalt we did, that was a pain to work on. It was horrendous, because we wanted to make it as small as possible, and with that, you get so many busted knuckles and stuff trying to work on the machine. It was like, you couldn't work on it without getting your hands just covered in blood. The new one's a bit better. It's got more room in there, so you can actually get your hands in there and work on it. But that's only from experience, really. So my job's a maintenance engineer. So for me, I know things have to come apart quickly, ideally. There's not always a way to make things work like that, so you can do it quickly and do it right. So that's where me and Sam argue about things for quite a long time. So Sam's a jet engine engineer. He works on the development of new jet engines. So everything's got to be perfect. In a robot, everything doesn't have to be perfect. So on a jet engine, you might have this size bolt here, this size bolt here, this size bolt here, and they're all different, but they don't have to come apart. It's just going to work forever. In a robot, you can put a slightly bigger bolt there and a slightly bigger bolt there. Just go, they're all the same as this bolt. So you've only got to use one tool to do it all quickly. So yeah, things like that. I always say, like, oh no, let's do it. And he was like, no, I want to do it perfect. I'm like, no, I want to be able to fix it in a rush. And yeah, so that's where we kind of differ, and eventually we compromise. And yeah, so maintainability is a really big factor, like, especially now, because the damage that you get dished out and receive in Battlebots is ridiculous. So it's really got to be a quick turnaround if it gets trashed. So for this season, the first time we've ever done it, we've actually built 2 complete Cobalts. So we've got 3 really, 4. We've got the one that we took last series, which is pretty knackered, and then we've got 2 brand new ones that are identical. They were made at exactly the same time. All the components kind of went together exactly the same time. They're literally millimetre exactly the same. So if we have the same sort of fight that we did against Minotaur again, and we needed to go in against Tombstone 2 hours later, we can just go, okay, stick this one in. And that's what a lot of teams are doing now, which sounds like very expensive, but it is. but it's not double the cost. It's, like another 30% of the cost again to do that.
So, is this the first time you've run 2 identical robots then?
Yeah.
So from other teams that have done it, have they found that the robots behave, even though they're like identical and built at the same time, do they behave differently? Like, are you expecting the 2 Cobalts to be different in some way?
They shouldn't be. They should be exactly the same, in theory. But I was speaking to, so last year, I know there was 2 death rolls. Again, exactly the same. I asked if they'd do it that way again, and he was, no, I'm not sure, because you get one robot trashed, so you run the other one, and then you've got 2 robots to fix instead of just one. So he wasn't fully sure. I think the way they were going to, so they turned up, I know them, Duck, White Force, another few other teams, they all turned up with at least 2 robots that are exactly the same. I think, I'm ready, plug and play, ready to go. I don't think that's the way that I'd want to run it. I think I'd rather have one, like, kind of hero robot, that's the robot, and then one that's completely in parts, and then use that slowly throughout the competition. So, like, you take your hero robot, okay, well, that motor's gone on that side, okay, we'll take you from robot 2, put it in, boom, and then, okay, chassis got smashed, okay, let's take all these parts and we know are good, put them in the secondary robot. So I think, for me, I think that's the way to go, because I've always got more confidence in something that's been in a fight and I know works well, didn't break, had no problems, still good, and then I've got more confidence in that component than one that's been sat on the shelf going, it should in theory be exactly the same, because you never know, do you? So
yeah.
For me, I'd rather say, okay, I know all these old bits work really well, let's use those again in this one, and then that should work exactly the same again. So I think that's more the way I'd play. I know that's like how Formula 1 do it. So they turn up with a car, and then they turn up with another car that's completely in parts.
That made me wonder, do you form an attachment to a robot?
Yeah. Like, I don't think, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? Like, you'd never want to sell Coyote, would you? And I don't think I'd ever want to sell Carbide. That's kind of like, it kind of fulfilled my childhood dream in a way. So that's kind of, even if it never gets used again, that's sitting in my garage and getting dusty. Cobalt, if you had a good offer for it, yeah, probably. It's just like it kind of feels like a tool to do a job. Do you know what I mean? Whereas Carbide, we spent a lot longer designing and building it, and like I said, it kind of did what I always wanted to do. So yeah, for me, I don't think I'd ever sell that. Yeah, like this, I guess they get quite sentimental, don't they, after the years? And then I know, like people like Ian, I don't think he'd ever sell Razor, even though that's literally sat in his laundry room with clothes dangling over it, it's dry, going rusty. Like,
amazing.
I don't think he'd ever sell that.
No, well, you couldn't. If you built that, you couldn't sell it.
I think he got offered in the 90s. I think he got offered like 90 grand for it from like some, he used to do events. I think he went to like some art place. There's some like, arty type going, it's a very beautiful modern art piece you've got there. And it was like, thanks.
That's incredible.
And he got offered 90 grand for it. Turn it down. But no, it's my life's work. And he was still using that to do like school shows and stuff. And I remember we went out to fly like remote control planes, and he was like, "I wish I'd sold it." but like 90 grand is a lot of money. But yeah, I don't think I'd sell Carbide. Maybe for 90 grand if anyone wants to offer us that. But but yeah, I don't think I'd sell it for what people would pay for it.
Yeah. Would you ever like build a different robot that's very different to Carbide, but use the Carbide name, or is it like Carbide, that name and that robot are like the same thing, and you couldn't reuse either of them?
No, I think that's been done now. I think that's kind of at the side. I think maybe if Robot Wars ever came back in another 10 years, maybe do like a more modern version, whatever modern is then, maybe do that. Whether I'd still be doing the hobby by then, I don't know. But no, I think Carbide is kind of Carbide now, isn't it? And then everything else will be different names. But kind of running out of names now that are like periodic table ones that aren't rubbish. Like you can remake a robot called Tin.
I mean, I think if anyone could, like, you could. That'd be amazing.
Tin would be alright, actually. I think it'd be kind of funny. Yeah, I might make my next robot called Tin.
A lethal robot called Tin.
yeah, Copper. Well, I don't know. No, maybe not Copper. It's not in Battlebots at the minute. That'd be a bit dodgy, wouldn't it?
A bit close. To other robots.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's done now. Yeah, I think I'll leave that.
Oh, the one other thing that I was interested to ask about, is something that we've been quite sort of reflective about over the last couple of months, is...
I'm worried now.
What is your sort of team dynamic within the team? On TV, we've always seen a lot more of you, and I wonder what it's like behind the scenes in terms of, I imagine, quite an equal partnership between you.
Yeah, me and Sam have always been kind of 50-50 and everything. Sam's not as keen at doing... Well, he is. Sam likes to think about everything he does. And sometimes when you get asked a question on TV, you have to have a comeback straight away. And he likes to think everything through methodically. And it's something he's getting better at. But yeah, he's not really a very outspoken person. He's quite a shy, intellectual guy. But I kind of forcing him now to kind of get more in the camera and take some of the glory for it, because he's built half the robot with me, so like he's entitled to as much kind of recognition as me or more now. So like every Battlebot season or Robot Wars season, we always took it fifth. Like, okay, I'm captain this time, you're captain there, I'll be captain this one. It's good because they always want a captain. They always want a face. At Battlebots, say you can be co-captain, so we've done that as well. It's 50-50. And now it's 3 ways because Kenny does a lot as well. So it's kind of 3 ways. Kenny doesn't like being on TV. It's not his kind of thing. Again, he's just like a very clever guy and a very good engineer, but he doesn't enjoy the TV side of it. So now it's really 3 ways. But they always shove the camera in my face, and I don't know why.
You make the mistake of answering their questions.
Yeah. It's really just maybe Sam's the clever one. I should just shut up for a bit and let him like embarrass himself instead.
It always amuses me that I think This Is Fighting Robots, or KOB 1.5, whatever you're going to call it, it's probably the most we've seen of him.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I don't think I really watched any of it.
I mean, you won't be alone in that, that's for sure.
Yeah, I kind of skipped to the fights. I was like, okay, these are funny sound effects. Okay. I didn't watch any. I'm not interested in watching other robot builders dance around and sing songs dressed like baked potatoes. It's just not like, it's not for me. Like I thought the show was shit, to be honest with you. But like, yeah, it's not something it's not made for Western audiences, is it? It did really well in China. Their TV is kind of weird and like that, and that's what they enjoy. So, but it's not really something I could sit and watch.
If nothing else, you got off lightly with the costume they gave you.
Oh, I didn't. That thing. Like, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'2", and I'm quite a broad bloke. And that jacket they gave me fit Ellis, and he's like built like a 5-year-old girl. So, and, like I wear like a large shirt in England, and like they gave me that jacket was a XXL, and it just about fit Ellis. Like you can't get clothes over there. So it's kind of like, here you go, wear that. Like, cool. It's like, it is what it is.
I'll just be uncomfortable then.
Yeah. I saw some of the uniforms I had people wearing this latest season, whatever that was called, and they looked bad. Like, yeah, I didn't regret not going.
I do have one final thing that I'm curious about. It's like, have you built robots that aren't for combat? Have you built like more science project robots just to sort of like learn a new technology or anything like that?
Well, no, because I work with them for my day job, so it's just an horrendous thought. so like, no.
Yeah, fair enough. Combat stuff, I guess, is different enough, isn't it? That it's a hobby rather than.
So my day job's kind of like robotics. This is like, the industrial robot arms that you see. I work a lot on that and automation products, and it's like when you've been doing that all day and you come home, it's the last thing you want to do. So yeah, I do that pretty much every day of the year. So yeah, for a hobby, no. Like the closest I get is messing about with like cars and remote control cars and planes and bits and bobs like that. So it's the less time I can spend doing that, the better now.
Fair enough. So it's robots to automate for your job, and then robots that destroy other robots when you're at home, right?
Yeah. I think there's probably a correlation with something there. Maybe quick job.
I'd like to give a big thanks to Dave for joining us today. If you want to keep up with what he's up to and all of Team Carbide, you can follow them on Facebook here. I also want to say thank you to Jamie for joining us briefly to talk about the Battlebots selection process. He's also on Facebook here. And if for some reason you feel that you didn't hear enough of me and Ryan talking in this, then you can fill at least 4 days of your life at spinnerproof.com, or you can search for Spinnerproof in the podcast app of your choice.